All right, great. Welcome everyone. We're going to take a few seconds while people join in. In the meantime, please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat. You can add your name and your organization and where you're joining us from. I would encourage our speakers to start us off as well. All right, great. And then we're going to begin. My name is Malvika Randive. I am the programs manager here at SID United States, and it is my pleasure to invite you to this event, Fostering Inclusive Education, the Informative Impact of EdTech and AI, hosted by the Education for Development Workgroup. And before you hear from our co-chairs and our speakers, just a few things about SID-US. If you're not familiar with us, we are the largest and the most active chapter of the Society for International Development, which is an international network founded in 1957 to serve as a global forum dedicated to sustainable economic, social, and political development. We serve as a global town square for the international development community, bringing together people from diverse organizations, disciplines, and career stages in a neutral, independent forum to share information and discuss important issues and challenges facing our community as we are doing today. There are a few different ways that you can get involved with us. You can check out some of our upcoming events and sign up for a weekly newsletter at www.sid-us.org. You can apply to be a volunteer co-chair, such as our co-chairs and workgroup associates here today, or a workgroup or network associate. You can follow us on social media. Our handle is at SID United States on all platforms, and you can keep in touch with all of our different programming. A few things to note for today's event. This is a recorded session and it will be shared publicly through our network and our social media channels. This recording will be available on YouTube in the next couple of days, and it will also be sent to everyone registered. Closed captioning is available and can be accessed through your own individual settings. If you have any questions for our speakers, please post them in the chat box. If it's for a specific speaker, please mention that and we will try to get answers to you. In the interest of time, if we are not able to answer all questions, apologies in advance. Thank you. And with that, I will turn it over to one of our co-chairs for the Education for Development Workgroup, Linda Wafi.
Thanks, Malvika. Sound okay? People can hear me? Great, wonderful. Hi, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining this event today. We're thrilled to have you join this conversation around the transformative impact of EdTech and AI in fostering inclusive education. My name is Linda Wafi. I am co-chair of the SID Education Working Group. I co-lead or co-chair the working group with my colleague, Carol De Silva, and I'll be facilitating the conversation today. With me, we have two exceptional guest speakers with extensive experience in education, specifically inclusive education and EdTech. I look forward to the discussion today, and we look forward to your engagement and your questions at the end of the discussion. So if you have questions, please drop them in the chat, and my colleagues within the SID team will help us compile so we can discuss them later. Slide, please. Before we get into introducing our speakers, I wanted to frame what we mean when we discuss inclusive education. Given the audience today and the familiarity with USAID and working on international development with large-scale funders and major funders around the world, I'm sharing today the inclusive education as defined by USAID and other major global donors. So, i.e., within that framework is an approach that ensures that all children and youth, particularly the most marginalized and those with disabilities, have equitable opportunities to access quality education. This approach emphasizes on creating a learning environment where every student feels valued, respected, and has equal opportunities to succeed. Slide, please. Some of its key elements involve modifying teaching methods, modifying curricula or adapting curricula and educational settings to ensure that all students can participate fully and effectively in the learning process. During our discussion today and through the work and experience of our two guests, We will address how technology can support inclusive education, specifically how technology provides tools and resources to improve these teaching methods, the curricula, and how it helps create an inclusive learning environment that accommodates the learning needs of all students. Next slide, please. And again, I just wanted to provide a quick framing of what we mean by technology in the field of education or edtech. Excuse me, of course, it can mean many things and take many forms, but in the context of international development programming, it can be assistive technology tools. These are the tools that are like screen readers, speech-to-text software, adaptive keyboards that help students with disabilities access and engage content. We have personalized learning tools. These can be software or apps that tailor learning experiences to specific student needs. And accessible content, this could be the digital textbook and online resources that are designed to be accessible to all students, including those with visual, auditory, or cognitive impairments. And then we have the interactive tools or the remote learning tools. These are the multimedia tools and the online platforms that enable people, whether they are students, learners, or teachers and educators, to connect, to access content remotely, or to create an opportunity for discussion forums and better collaboration and communication. Most recently, many of these tools have integrated AI technologies to further enhance these tools and to adjust to the needs of students and offer solutions that can be better or that are able to respond to the specific needs of each student. It's important to note, sorry, next slide. Before we dive into the topic, oh, sorry, can we go back one? I think I missed the limitations one. Oh, odd. Well, before we dive in, maybe I'm missing a slide here, but I wanted to make sure that we note that technology does have its challenges and limitations. It's not, a silver bullet that just fixes everything. It does have some limitations, most notably costs. It can be really expensive for schools and educational systems that are already underfunded. There are accessibility and equity issues. Not all students have access to the same technology or to the same connectivity, which can further exacerbate existing inequalities. And not to mention the challenges around training teachers and educators and all the implementation challenges that can be really time consuming and resource intensive. Today's discussion will help us learn about the opportunities from the two guests who through their work have been leveraging technology to address some of the challenges students face in the classroom. With me today are, excuse me, with me today are Dr. Lisa Waters. She's Vice President of Programs at Benetech, and Dina Robashi, who is Director of Global Education Transformation at Microsoft. I want to start with Dr. Lisa. Lisa, can you give us an overview of your work in inclusive education, an overview of Benetech and the work it does in the field of IE and technology?
Sure. Thanks, Linda. Hi, everyone. I am Dr. Lisa Waters, and I am the Vice President of Programs at Benetech. Next slide. Benetech is an edtech nonprofit focused on providing equitable opportunities for all learners, regardless of their ability, right? And we do mean all. We believe that this equitable access is a human right, right? It's not just nice to have, but it is a human right that everybody receives equitable access to education. Our mission is built around providing technology, capacity building, programs, and services. And we want to transform the education to be inclusive and improve learning outcomes for students with disabilities. So my background is in special education. I was a special education teacher long before I came to Benetech, and a professor, an adjunct professor. At Benetech, it gives us the opportunity to marry my passions around technology and inclusion and be able to support students and learners all over the world. Next slide. Many people know of us as Bookshare.
Bookshare is the world's largest library of ebooks for people that read differently. I can go into more detail on this in a little bit, but basically the collection has millions of titles, or nearly a million of titles, that empower hundreds of thousands of people who can't read traditional books. So we're talking about people who may have disabilities in reading, like dyslexia, or a visual disability, like blindness or low vision, or have a physical disability where they can't hold a book or turn a page. Next slide. Oh, I'm sorry. Can you go back one more? I forgot to mention something. Two more, actually. I do want to make sure that I talk about real quickly. I'm going to talk about four different things. One is Bookshare, which I just talked about. The next thing I'm going to talk about is STEM and our commitment to STEM and our use of artificial intelligence to help improve access to STEM for people of all learner types. And then I want to talk a little bit about our inclusive education in developing countries. So I'll give you some examples of some of the work we've done in India, Africa, and the Philippines. And then lastly, I'll talk to you about the Inclusive Education Working Group. Sorry, meant to put that out there in the beginning, but forgot. So now we're at STEM. Thank you. I appreciate that. So we really do believe that the jobs of the future are STEM related, and we want to make sure that we can remove any barriers to these jobs for persons with disabilities. So we are committed to STEM accessibility through a tool we use called Page AI. It's an AI remediation service, and what it does is it goes into our books and will pull out images, because if you are a blind reader and you're using a screen reader to read books, oftentimes equations are actually put in as images. And what happens is the screen reader will say, solve this equation, image, and you have no idea what that equation is. So what this Page AI tool will do, will go into the books, take that image, and be able to turn that into a readable equation so that the person then hears, solve this equation, a squared plus b squared equals c squared, where a equals 3, b equals 4, etc. Right? So having this ability has opened up opportunities for people to access images and equations that had previously been locked in books for quite a while. And we have already to date been able to remediate 8 million images. This work, really has the potential of opening up STEM opportunities around the world. We did an initiative with Kaggle. We did a Kaggle competition, which is the world's leading platform of where AI engineers come together. And we drew over 600 teams of advanced AI experts from around the world to help change the access to this inaccessible content. So they worked on things like vertical bars, line graphs, dot graphs, scatter plots, so that we are not able to just stop at math and math equations, but that we are able to go to other parts of STEM as well. We want to continue this work by adding physics and chemistry and a lot of other STEM related things, but this is expensive and it takes time. So this is something that we look to all of you to kind of help with. How do we increase STEM accessibility to all? Next slide, please. So we know that with access to information and access to STEM, people can do much better in schools, but it's not always the same when we look at around the world. In many developing countries, there's a limited access to materials, as Linda was saying, right? Teachers may not have the proper training to do the work that they need to do, and there's still a lot of negative social attitudes. And so when we go into some of these countries, we have to really look at where we're starting at and where the country is in supporting of people with disabilities. Next slide, please. So for the last 3 years, we had had a grant to support work done in India. And what we did is we worked with Schools for the Blind to open up opportunities for people who needed to have access to technology in order to be able to learn. So what was happening in India was many Schools for the Blind would have very educated students who had only learned to read with Braille or learned to communicate with scribes. Well, and what was happening is when they were graduating, they didn't have the necessary skills to be successful in the workforce. And so what was happening was we had people who were very educated. Many of them had gone to post-secondary, but really were stuck in jobs that they did not have the ability to grow and to succeed. So what we did is we came in with a digital technology program, and this digital technology program opened up opportunities. It taught the students how to use devices and to learn how to type and learn how to read with inclusive educational technology right in their classroom, and gave students the opportunity to now be able to communicate their work, their knowledge on their own. And so what we saw was students who had previously used scribes to take their standardized tests in grade 10 we're now taking them on the computer individually. And now, instead of just getting a job where they basically had a job but didn't really contribute to the organization, now we have people who are getting jobs in the hotel industry, which pay much higher than the jobs that they were getting before. This work has opened up opportunities for us to do this not only in schools for the blind, but also in schools around India to make them more inclusive. Because if a blind student went to a regular school and the teacher couldn't read Braille, they couldn't learn. Now that they have the skills to be able to communicate with the technology through the computer or through their tablet and external keyboard, now these students are able to actively participate in class. And as Linda pointed out, inclusion is not just being there, right? It's being able to be actively included. Next slide, please. So we are looking to scale this work in the Philippines as well. And the Philippines has some other unique issues, right? There's scarcity of accessible materials. So something like Bookshare, being able to get the materials into Bookshare or into an accessible format will open up the opportunities for kids to learn in so many different ways. There's also, as Linda mentioned, a digital divide, right? There's a lot of issues where kids may not have technology or may not have access to the internet. And so we're working with the government, we're working with different organizations in the Philippines to make sure that we can provide support. And then also limited awareness, right? So there's still a lack of understanding about print disabilities or how to support people with disabilities in the education system. So we need to work on that as well. Next slide, please. We also do a lot of work across Africa, and that educational landscape faces significant challenges when ensuring equitable access for individuals, particularly those who are visually impaired. Because there's limited resources, there's inadequate awareness, and there's outdated pedagogical practices that serve as barriers in mainstream learning. So what we've learned in Africa is that we need to first actively engage with the government, right, to help implement inclusive education policies. We also need to leverage local expertise, and we work with key partners like Kenya Institute for the Blind and similar other bodies in other countries. And these strategic partnerships leverage their expertise so that we can do more on the ground. We also advocate for modern pedagogy and empower people through technology. So one of the things you'll hear is that technology is very expensive. One of the things that we've been very clear on is that we need technology that is affordable, available, and appropriate. Because the same technology that you use in one country may not be the same technology you use in another country. And it's important to understand what the resources are in the countries that you're working with. So I realize I'm kind of flying through these different programs pretty quickly, but I wanted to talk on the last point, if you don't mind changing the slide. Because of the work that we've done in the US as well as India, Philippines, and Africa, we really felt the need for an inclusive education working group. And so last year we were funded by All Children Reading to build this inclusive education working group, pulling in experts from around the world to come together to think through what are the challenges of inclusive ed tech and what are the things that we need to address. And so the Inclusive Ed Tech Working Group right now is working to maximize the contributions of educational technology for learners in low and middle income countries. We are focused on the intersection of ed tech and inclusive ed and how to promote positive outcomes for individuals with disabilities. We have over 40 organizations from around the world who come together on a regular basis to discuss policy, implementation, and recommendations for inclusive ed tech. This is something that we would love for you to join as well, right? That we need more voices, we need more thoughts, we need more people to do this work because we know that at Benetech, although we believe that the work we are doing is really changing the world, we can do so much more with others. And so, this working group is a great opportunity for Benetech and others to come together to really change the field for kids with disabilities and increase their opportunities for learning. So I think I did that within my time frame, but I will hand it over to you now, Linda.
Thanks, Dr. Lisa. And I think we'll have you dig a little bit deeper into some of these tools later. But I'm going to turn over to Dina, if you can speak about your work as part of your role within Microsoft in terms of education and EdTech.
Absolutely. Give me a second to share. Can everyone see my screen? Great. Hello, everyone. It's really great to be with you. This is my first SID event, so I'm very honored that Linda invited me to speak to you all. I'm Dina Gabashi. I'm a Global Education Transformation Director at Microsoft. And I am not sure, what do you know about Microsoft and the role that it plays in advancing education and improving education around the world? So I just wanted to start with just our mission. Our mission in general is to empower every person in every organization on the planet to achieve more. We believe this wholeheartedly. We actually do feel every day that our work contribute to this mission. And in education in particular, we actually say we're empowering every school, every educator, every learner on the planet to achieve more. It's ambitious, and we're really hoping that we can get to reach as many of these students and learners and educators worldwide. The thing about Microsoft mission is that it's really people-centric. You notice that we're just focused about the people, about how we can empower them and how we could really make their lives better. When it comes to inclusive education, I think this is really a personal thing for me. I grew up in Egypt, and I think it was in middle school when I started wondering, why are we doing this? Why are we going to school? What are we learning? And why are we learning what we're learning? Just to pass a test. And then after the test, your mind goes blank on all of this content that you just learned. And then I looked around me, and I was struggling with some subjects. Some of my friends were struggling with a lot of subjects, but it didn't matter. The teacher was still teaching the new content. And nobody was really helping us. And the only resort was to actually go get some private tutoring if we can afford it. I started to question education in general, and I really wanted to do something about it. And a lot of the work that I've done since, I've volunteered to help vision impaired girls with math. I did a lot of philanthropic efforts. I started my own student nonprofit doing some projects in Egypt. I started my work at Intel, working with governments and districts and education institutions to improve technology. And then I actually jumped over to a school system to be the director of academic technology and get to experience for myself what it's like to try to implement technology on the ground. It was a huge eye opener. I had authority, I had budget, and yeah, I still faced challenges. Taking all these learnings with me to a global platform like Microsoft was a dream. I had the opportunity now to be able to scale my learnings and to connect with a lot of different education ministers and institutions around the world to talk about the importance and the role of people in the transformation journey. One of the research, I did a master's in education along the way, and one of the research that I really connected with and drove a lot of my thinking is the 2 Sigma problem by Bloom. This is one of the first studies that actually stirred attention towards personalized learning. This study looked at the effects of students learning with a tutor to deliver just-in-time customized help. The striking finding was that by the end of the 3 weeks, the average student under tutoring was about 2 standard deviations above the average of the control class. That means that the average tutor student scored higher than 98% of the students in the control class. This makes individual tutoring the most effective instructional practice. But unfortunately, physically, this is not possible. Teachers cannot divide their times equally across all of these students. This is the challenge that I think technology could really help address and play a significant role in. And that's what drove me in the whole field of education technology. It's not just about personalizing and making sure that every student gets the right support at the right time. This applies to all learners everywhere. But then you have learners that have specific abilities, specific challenges, specific learning differences. And this is not as trivial and as small as some people may think. Teachers really deal with this situation in all of their different classes. So on top of having to personalize for every student, they also have to make sure that they have the accessibility tools and support that they need to be able to help all of these students that need this additional support. How do we do all this, and how do we do it in a way that is seamless and consistent from one place to another across multiple teachers so our students really get the learning that they need? Another thing at Microsoft that we really believe in is that everything we do is inclusive by design. We do this in all of our products, whether it's in education or outside of education. We believe in the concept of nothing about us without us. Exclusion really happens when we solve problems using our own biases. So as part of the inclusive design philosophy at Microsoft, we really seek out those exclusions and make sure that we use them as opportunities to create new ideas and designs that benefit everyone. We design with the disability community, and through user experience research and insights that is fielded by the community, we create products and services that empower people with disabilities to achieve more, following the 3 Microsoft inclusive design principles: recognizing exclusion, learning from diversity, and then solving for one and extending to many. I am going to stop here for now, just kind of hoping that this gives an idea about why do we care at Microsoft and how do we really approach inclusive education. We'll talk a little bit more later about what is it that we're actually able to offer.
Great, thank you, Dina. Very, very nice framing, and really fascinating to hear the approach that you're working with. I'm actually gonna stay with you and would love to hear more about the actual EdTech or AI tools that Microsoft is using or making available to in support of inclusive education.
Absolutely. So let me start a little bit with, to us, education is about building the skills of the future. How do we build and nurture the talent that we need in order for societies to be successful and for individuals to be successful as well? We have been tracking for the longest time the skill shift, and it's not particularly new. It's actually accelerating now with the introduction of artificial intelligence. Well, with artificial intelligence, we're going to need workforce that is able to deploy different skills very quickly. We're going to need to start looking at what are the different skills that people are going to need now that artificial intelligence could perhaps help enhance some of the different roles and do some of the different tasks that we were preparing people for. And pedagogy will need to keep up more than ever. What we teach, how we teach, and the systems for assessing and tracking skills are going to need to change as well. It always has, but now the acceleration is actually beyond what anybody could digest. I myself cannot keep up with all of the recent announcements about advancement in AI that my company is doing. And our CEO said that we are an AI company. AI is going to be in every software that is going to be used by anybody in the future, starting from now. So I think it's really important for us to start focusing a little bit on, when we talk about technology, it's mostly going to be AI moving forward. So with AI, we're seeing a lot of opportunities to reinvent education, both impacting the output of education by shifting the skills that are needed in the workforce, but also by empowering teachers, administrators, and learners to be able to provide the needs that are necessary for each individual student. AI has the power to amplify human ingenuity and just really help expand our capabilities so we can achieve more. Educators in the research that we've done that have reported to us about the fact that they're struggling with enough time in the day to get work done. I know I can relate. I worked with teachers. I try to implement the technology programs in schools. And my first challenge was teachers' time, to the point that I actually started creating a heat map for the teachers so that and started shadowing them, so I understand exactly how their time is being spent. Even though I was in academic technology, I started focusing on teacher well-being because it was an enabler to us being able to do anything that is conducive to having the results we want. We could use artificial intelligence really to help teachers save time on a lot of the administrative tasks. They constantly complain about them and they're constantly increasing, and really reallocate that time to activities that support student learning. I'll give you an example. One of the things that we've done in India. So I don't know if many of you know, Microsoft is a major investor in OpenAI, so the company of ChatGPT. So all of the AI models, the GPT AI models that get released by OpenAI are existing on the Microsoft Cloud platform. And we have all of these models and we do expand beyond them, or we build tools and resources around them. And we have about half a million partners around the world, give or take, that also leverage this environment to develop their own resources and apps and tools. So the ecosystem is quite large. So one of the things that we've done in India is we wanted to do exactly that, save teachers time. So we partnered with Microsoft Research, we've partnered with NGOs on the ground, and with actual teachers and leaders in a community in Bangalore. And we developed a co-pilot for teachers that really helps them leverage artificial intelligence to create lesson plans, to individualize instruction for students, and to do this pretty quickly in English or in Canada, their local language. We embedded the app into Telegram, into WhatsApp, so the tools that teachers are using every day. So there is really a seamless kind of experience for teachers when they're doing this. The pilot really generated lots of great qualitative results. A lot of teachers said the quality is really great. They're able to use the plans right away without a ton of modifications. And they're learning in the process as well. So I think there is a long-term benefit that we're not seeing yet. So we brought in Cornell University to help us then do a more quantitative research and as we continue to scale this. One of the key elements is we co-design the solution. So we have the building blocks and we just co-design the solution to tailor it to the need of that specific community. The other thing that I'd love to highlight from Microsoft is a category of tools we call learning accelerators. Those are available for free, and I don't think we do a great job letting the world know about them. At a time when we're talking about learning poverty and every student needing further support to catch up and be able to deal with the consequences of the pandemic. Gaps existed all the time, but now they got worse. So how do we address the gaps? How do we help those catch up and accelerate? These learning accelerators leverage artificial intelligence to enable students to do independent practice. It's all monitored by teachers. So think about it as teachers start creating assignments for students to be able to practice independently, and AI provides the feedback that they need so that they understand what they did right, what they need to continue to improve, and then it coaches them on how to improve. This really saves teachers a ton of time. And we heard the teachers say it's like having many teachers in the classroom at the same time. We've heard a lot of students just beaming about how this is really taking away the stigma of having to read in front of teachers, of having to read in front of the whole class, and feeling embarrassed about it. There was even one student out of Saudi Arabia, they thought she had a learning difference. And then after she started using Reading Coach, she gained confidence and she was able to read better, and they were all shocked. I'm not saying everybody that has learning difference or accessibility need is actually dealing with anxiety and lack of confidence, but maybe there are some. There's more than this one girl that actually have this issue that is preventing them from being able to really tap into their full potential in progressing and reading and math and other subjects. So math progress and coach is the same exact concept. Is coming up very soon. Within the next few weeks, we've got a well-being tool as well that helps teachers track how students are feeling over time. Speak of progress and coach, same concept of AI providing feedback, but this is all about speaker skills and all of these digital literacy skills that are really important with search progress and coach as well. The beauty of all of this is there's data that the student sees, the teacher sees, and it could be aggregated all the way up to a minister if the need be. And all of this is available for free. And I believe the product team is going to continue to add more to this suite of learning accelerators. This is just a little bit more of the same. It just talks about the real-time coaching, the inclusive education that is included in all of it, the ability to personalize practice. There's also accessibility tools built into the reading. So for students who need additional reading support while they're reading, they could improve the font, the contrast, and any of the other settings. This is all part of Microsoft Immersive Reader, which is an open source plugin that can be included in any content that enables some of these accessibility features. In the Philippines, we've actually done some work, and they've taken on expanding reading progress and reading coach. They do a catch-up Fridays, so every Friday after school, they actually have more time where the students practice and teachers get all of this valuable insight about how students are progressing in their reading. I'm not going to show the video, but I'm happy to share it later. In terms of accessibility, I talked a little bit about immersive readers, open source. We're talking to Encyclopedia Britannica and others about including it. So we could include it in any content that's available. It's included in all of our tools in Microsoft. There's translator, dictation, and then there are accessibility accessories that are available either within the operating system windows or in the different, and I'm rushing through all of this now so I can give a little bit more time, but some of the accessories and the abilities within the operating system as well to just help every student be, and every learner and every user be able to really adapt to their needs. Our partners are also creating other tools and ways to support. We've seen, some partners are using STEM-based reading fluency program for disability diverse learning. We've seen other partners using voice apps to help students with autism. So there's a lot more that you could see as well coming from our partners. Over to you, Linda.
Thanks, Dina. That's great. And while you're talking, there were a lot of questions coming in. So I want to turn it over to Dr. Lisa for a little bit, and maybe we'll address the questions right after, just to make sure we respond to people and adapt with the time we have left. Dr. Lisa, do you want to speak about the examples that you've used as part of your work or Benetech that have been successful?
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead. Thank you.
So, the inclusive ed program that I was telling you is a full program. It's not just a piece of technology that goes into the classroom and fixes everything. And we know that that's not how kids are learning anyway. So let me talk a little bit about Bookshare first, and then I'll get to some of the other types of work we're doing. I had mentioned very briefly that many people know Benetech because of Bookshare, and Bookshare is that online accessible repository of books that are available for students with what we call print disabilities. So, this is not a special education term. This is a copyright term. So imagine you have someone who is holding a traditional printed book. They can't hold the book because they may not have the arm strength or the dexterity to turn the page. They're not reading that book, right? You have someone who's looking at the page and because of their vision can't see the words, or maybe the words are too small. They're not reading that book because they're not able to access that content. And then when we talked about dyslexia and other reading issues, there are people who, with that same book, would struggle with fluency because they were tripping over the words or spending time, sounding out words, and comprehension would go down. They're not really reading that book. And so that's what Bookshare was designed to support. In the US, the U.S. Department of Special Education Programming supports our work, and Bookshare is available for free to all U.S. students in schools. We've also made the decision as an organization to make Bookshare available to all persons with print disabilities in developing countries as well, right? So this is something that we want to make sure we open up access to information the best we can. And Dina was talking a little bit about some of the features and things that we know help people with print disabilities read better, right? So Dina, you had mentioned increased font size or maybe color contrast, right? These are all things that are really important for learners who struggle with reading traditional printed books. And being able to have the ability to modify the speed at which it reads back. These are all really good practices. And when you're thinking about what tools to use in the classroom, you really want to think about the students you're serving. What are their needs? Not necessarily what is their label, but what is their need? What are the things that do they need? Do they need black text on white paper, or do they need yellow and blue, right? What is, would you have put an overlay on something if, if you had that physical text? And so, tools like Bookshare, tools like many of the Microsoft products really address these needs of the students. And they're great because they are personal. You can personalize them. One reader may read one way, one reader may read another way. One of the things about Bookshare is that we provide the opportunity to read in a variety of different ways, not only with what can be done with the technology, but also how you're reading. So can you read, you can read hard copy Braille, right? If you have a way to emboss the text, you could print that out. In the US, many students read with refreshable Braille devices where the words are put on a device about the size of their phone, and they can scroll their fingers over and read the book as the pins pop up and help them get to the words that are in the text. We work with Microsoft where all of our books can be downloaded into Microsoft Word. And so you can then use the tools that Microsoft already has built in, which is really great. Again, increasing the font, changing the color contrast, things like that. Or with, you can use it on your computer or tablet or phone, right? And I know that there was a question, and I'm not entirely answering it quite yet, but there's always a question, I should say, about, well, what if people don't have internet? What if they don't have connectivity? And I think one of the important things that Bookshare has and that people should be looking for in inclusive ed tech tools anyway is, do they have on and offline capabilities, right? You may need to access the internet to download some information, but the kids in many places will not have access to internet or may have spotty internet or may even have trouble with devices, bringing them home. So making sure that these are available both on and offline will help kids increase their skills, increase their reading. I will hold on one thing I wanted to say as far as, evidence, because I know that that's coming up in a little bit, but I think it's also really important to think about, are we just throwing tools into the classroom, or are we throwing tools into the classroom where we are seeing evidence of growth? And, data is a very important piece of education. And, and as a former educator, time is tough. You're absolutely right. Teachers don't have the time to invest in all these. So when it's built into the tool, that also is really helpful for the teachers because they're able to get information back about how their students are doing without having to add additional work onto their load. So. And I'll pause there. I don't know if you wanted me to also talk about the inclusive ed programming. That's a little bit more complicated because, like I said, it is very much in person. The students are brought through a sort of a trajectory of learning where they, many of them have never learned the shapes of letters or keyboarding skills. And so before we even get to something like Bookshare, we have a lot of other work that we need to do. In some countries, even how to use a tablet, and how to use an accessible keyboard or an external keyboard are really the beginning skills. And then we get to the point where you're writing, where you're taking notes in the classroom. We work with the teachers to make sure that they're assigning homework for the students, that the students will have to write and use their skills in writing so that the teacher can then read their work and give feedback. It's not just, what you're observing in the classroom or taking notes, it's really interactive. We also work with teachers on how to differentiate learning. And one of the things that we haven't really said much about today is, a really solid classroom is one that's universally designed for learning and has multiple ways for people to interact with the information. So if you have a classroom, an inclusive classroom where you have people who may be deaf or hard of hearing, where you have students who may be blind, where you have students who may have learning disabilities or may have cognitive impairments, being able to structure the classroom and the use of the technology to structure the classroom is very helpful. And so for an example, one classroom I was in India recently had a big whiteboard. They had a smart board, and on the smart board, they had the written words of what the teacher was saying so that people who may have been hard of hearing could follow along with that. Kids who were blind also had their tablets at their desks so that they could hear what was being read aloud. You can simplify text so that people who may not understand the complexity of a piece of text can have that simplified in a version that they understand a little bit better. So there's a lot of different things you can do to support different learning types, even when they're all in the same classroom. So I'll leave it at that for now.
That's great. Thank you. And I know you brought up the question of the data available about the effectiveness of these tools. But before we address that, I wanted to open it up quickly to people online. I know there are some questions in the chat. Does anybody want to say hello, be a brave soul and ask any burning questions?
Yes, Linda. Can I say hello?
Go ahead.
Yeah. Actually, I have been working within inclusive education since a long time, and I wanted to talk about the unique experience that I had in Ramallah in Palestine, where we implemented inclusive education in a high school. It was challenging to implement inclusive education within the high school, especially the school was international and it was in the second language. So there is physics, chemistry, biology in English, and where the children with learning difficulties, dyslexic or something like that, they have a lot of challenges there. And we had also a challenging in working with teachers because teachers were resisting or rejecting the inclusive education program itself. In addition to that, the type of the cases that we had, like Tourette syndrome, where the child can say things without being aware of what he's said. So it was like mixed types of behaviors, a mixed type of rejection from the system to adopt the inclusive education high school. It was also a challenge with the second language in high school, adolescence. So it takes us years to work within that system to simplify it, and we were using some technology to assist us, like the students who have vision impairment. We used to have readers for them or the equipment to exlarge, or we used to be with them in the classes. We worked also around contextualizing the materials for the students, a individual education plan for some of them, referring them to vocation. It was mixed type of vocational training and being in the school also to have their own education system. So it was like challenging. It took us few years to smooth those challenges in the high school, but it was easier in the primary schools to adopt programs like inclusive education. This is my experience in Palestine, the West Bank. I wanted to share it. Yeah,
Thank you, Nariman.
you're welcome.
Any reactions to that?
I mean, so my background is inclusion, right? So I've done a lot of studying this. Inclusion is not easy, right? And it takes a commitment. It really takes a commitment. And so, oftentimes when students are failing in school, the question is, did the students fail the school or did the school fail the students? And, and it does take time. It does take energy. It's not something that you can just, open the doors and say, we're inclusive, right? Because there are things that are needed. And I think that, I applaud your persistence to keep it going, even when it was difficult and challenging, and really to look at the students that are in the school to make sure that people believe that students belong there. I think that's one of the hardest things to do is change mentality of people who, people who may not think that certain people belong in a classroom. There's a lot of research. Most of it was done in the 80s, so it's quite old, but I'm not sure anyone's doing it right now. But it showed that, students were more readily included when they were easy, right? They didn't have behaviors and they didn't have, special challenges. Well, that's not all students, right? And when we do say inclusive, inclusion all means all, we really do mean all. And so, I do want to acknowledge that it is not easy. It is challenging, but it is worth it, right? And I'm sure that the students who went through that program, who graduated, probably, found the benefit. And it's not just students with disabilities who find benefit, it's the people without disabilities as well. There's a lot of evidence that shows that they benefit from learning in a classroom with a variety of types of learners as well.
Yeah, thank you so much. As challenging as technology can be, changing human behavior is much more, and perceptions and biases is much more challenging. So definitely something that needs to be added to the pot. Thank you. Dina, there was a quick question I want to go back to about the learning accelerators being available to languages with smaller numbers of speakers. And maybe while you're answering, explain a little bit about how these large language models and tools that are built on that, how basically the amount of information we put in really determines the amount of information that we get. It's not like, I think the biggest perception that I get a lot when talking about technology or AI is that it's like a thing that it functions on its own, as opposed to it just feeds off information that you input into it. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yes, absolutely. So first I did put a link in the chat to the list of languages. And this list is growing. When we started, I think it was less than 90, and we just keep adding to it the more we hear of interest. But take a look, see if the languages you're looking for are there or not. The learning accelerators in particular, we set them up in a way that it's in an environment that is controlled by the teacher. So the content that is exposed to the student. So we're using artificial intelligence, two forms of artificial intelligence really in those tools. And I'm not going to geek out, I promise. The first is the generative AI, like ChatGPT, that you've all used. And this is to help the teachers generate the different paragraphs for students to read at different reading levels. So saving teachers time instead of having them scout or create their own, but it creates it, and it could be even tailored to, I know these students like to talk about sports, so I'm just going to create a paragraph on sports. So that really helps the teachers tailor the content to the students using generative AI, but then they actually validate that there's something that they want to push to the students. The other AI that we're using is the machine learning AI that is now detecting and learning from the student reading what they got right and what they didn't get right, the fillings, the accuracy, etc. And there is research behind that we've used to manage this part. When we talk about just kind of getting out of learning accelerators to large language models in general, large is the operative world. They feed off of, billions of records to be able to really start understanding a little bit how language works. And then the way they work is they actually predict what's the next word that is logical, and they add a little bit of randomization there so that it doesn't look very rehearsed and repeatable every time. It is true that the data that feeds these models impacts the model's responses in a large way. What we try to do at Microsoft from the get-go 5 years ago is we established an Office of Responsible AI, and we started putting AI principles in place that guided and fed into all of the different developments that we do. So there are 7 principles: inclusion, transparency, accountability. I can put a slide in the chat that shows all 7 of them, but basically they're what the engineers look at. We have people that assess the work that's being developed by the engineers to make sure that all 7. And then for all the partners that build tools on our platform, we sort of like an assessment. So think of it as a scoring of their tool. Here is how you fit on all of these 7 principles, and here are tools for you to go and recommendations to go and fix some of these issues. So there are no biases, there are no issues. We're still early in the artificial intelligence world, so I'm not going to say that it's perfect. But there are ways for us, and we've seen a lot of different education institutions and governments we're working with right now actually say, look, I want these large language models to then work on my data. So that example I gave about India and the co-pilot with teachers, it actually was grounded, as we call it, in the curriculum of that area of Bangalore. And that is something that we could do. We could tell the large language models, only look in that data, don't give me answers from anywhere else. There is also fine tuning, which can be done. So if you want to fine tuning on a set of data or tweak the model a little bit so that it leverages some of the local resources, that can be done as well. So there are ways to sort of control it. It's not going to be what you find online that is available to everybody, the ChatGPT, etc. It would have to be something that we develop. We could add additional content filtering and safety, etc. to it as well.
Thanks, Dina. Any other questions?
There was one question about, can the inclusive education programming work with refugees? And we have not done work in that area. Most of the work we've done is around students with disabilities. I think the biggest issue there would wanting to make sure that the content can be made available and shared, right? So in in India, for example, the government has shared the curriculum so that all students could benefit from the technology and the accessibility on it. So we need to make sure that if we were supporting populations that may be marginalized, you know, are we able to get content? Are we able to provide that in languages that are appropriate? You know, the answer is always yes, right? We can do, you know, we can definitely modify this. It's designed on best practices. It's not, you know, something that is specifically for one particular group. But because of our expertise is generally around disabilities, it would be something that we'd want to work with partners to make sure that we were culturally and appropriately supporting the people in the program.
Thanks. If there are no questions, my final question to you would be, what is, we've learned about the tools, we've learned about some successful examples of implementation. Is there data or evidence that exists right now that talks about the efficacy or the effectiveness of these tools? What do we know so far about how it works? Does it work best on its own? Does it work best with teachers? What is missing? What is needed? What information do we have currently, and how can we use that information to better improve inclusive classrooms?
I mean, there's a lot of research out there that talks about different aspects of what we've discussed today. So I pulled a few different things just to talk about. So the International Journal of Educational Technology and Higher Ed did a study around personalized learning, and they found that ed tech can significantly benefit students with special needs. They found that 78% of students with disabilities who received personalized instruction through technology showed improved academic performance. They were more engaged, and they had compared this to traditional classrooms. Also around equitable access to content, Blackboard did a study that revealed that 70% of educators believe that ed tech tools have made educational content more accessible to students with disabilities. So this empowered their students to be more engaged in a wide variety of subjects, not just in, you know, maybe just in reading. You know, from Benetech's perspective, we have something called a web reader, where it's just another way to read the books that are in the Bookshare collection. And as we talked about before, having those accessibility features built in do make a difference. And so, you know, if an average reading time with someone using text-to-speech, that's where the word is highlighted and the sentence may be highlighted, but word level highlighting. The average session of someone who was reading on the Bookshare platform was about 28 minutes and 36 seconds. When they used the text-to-speech reading along with the reading, it actually increased 154% of their engagement, right? They were engaged 154% more than they were if they were just reading it alone. Same with like customization of font size. So when they were able to change the font or the color, they read 69% more than they did without those tools. And even things like bookmarks, right? So putting bookmarks in so they can find their place when they come back. Students were increasing 91% over the kids who are not using those features. So we know that accessibility features work. We know, you know, there is evidence that shows that people are more engaged when they're reading in a way that works for them. Dina, I don't know if you have other evidence to add to that.
I just wanted, I'll quickly show just two pieces of research. There is research out there, but I want to highlight something that like you mentioned, Lisa, before. Transformation is really about people, and it's in our experience at Microsoft too. And the time I spent at Intel, it's people that make or break any technology implementation. The tool just works the way it works. But how do we implement it, and how do we make sure that we do the change management, the vision setting, and any culture changes that are needed is really critical. And this is left to the people to do this work. The two researches that I wanted to highlight, one is very new and one is pretty old. And there is a lot of research in between. But Project CRED has been sort of a guiding principle since I was in Intel. Project CRED is a project that followed thousands of schools to see their one-on-one technology implementations, what made it work in some settings and what didn't, what caused the failure or perhaps less than expectations being met in the other schools. And they've identified key implementation factors. If you look at the key implementation factors, it's all about what you use and how you use it. I love the fact that they mentioned the school leader training, because in my personal experience, if you don't have the school leader on board, and if that school leader is not doing the change management practices that are needed, everything falls apart. So we always talk to teachers, we always talk to the top leaders, but we often forget those middle ones that are key to any change. And then the change management practices. I'm a change management geek. I love it. I'm willing to do the hard work to actually see results, but oftentimes every technology implementation, I want to say 80% of the ones I've seen really lack on the change management practices, either a top-down, we're going to do this, here's a tool, and then they wonder why the adoption rates are low. So that research is really critical. It's still available online. There is a link. There's also a very recent research that talks about large language models, their impact on math, and the fact that they could actually be effective in math education, enhance the learning outcomes, and provide this personalized tutoring that we talk about. There's a link to this research here as well. One of the things that I love is one of the researchers compares artificial intelligence to either steroids, Nikes, or coaches. So he's basically saying it's the same tool, but you could use it as a steroid that really gives you that quick boost when you need it. Or you could use it as a way to improve your skill set, as you would with trainers or Nikes or sneakers. Or it could be your coach that really helps build and develop your skill set over time and takes you to other higher levels of competency. So it's just a tool, and how we use it is really what matters.
Thanks, Dina. Thanks for sharing that information. We have a lot more questions coming in, but I think we have to wrap it up because we're at time. For anyone who is interested to learn more about any of the resources, please continue to connect with us, engage with us. The SID Education Working Group has a LinkedIn page that's just been dropped in the chat. And we also have a survey for you all. If you have comments, if you have ideas for future events, for other discussions for us to tackle, please let us know. Thank you so much to my guests. Thank you so much, Dina. Thank you so much, Dr. Lisa, for joining us today. I definitely learned a lot and really enjoyed the conversation today, and really appreciate your contributions. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks so much for having us. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Have a good rest
Bye.
of your day. Thanks.